Chapter 4. It was everywhere. He couldn't escape the rising levels. He pounded on the glass walls, but no one was there. He was alone. The water was rising to his shoulders, its icy touch threatening to take away his breath. He tried to call for help, but he couldn't even hear his own voice over the overwhelming roar of the water. No one would have heard him anyway. He was alone. The water was up to his neck now, dancing back and forth under his chin, leaping at his jaw, tugging at his ears. "Please," he begged. "I don't want to die." The water mocked him, suddenly surging upwards and then lowering back down. He spat and choked as the liquid gushed through his open mouth and nostrils, trying to take whatever air he had left to breathe. No one heard his cries. He was alone. And then he saw them. 4 shadowy figures stood outside his cage. They stood there, casually watching as if he was some sort of zoo attraction. He put both of his hands on the glass wall in front of him, mentally begging for them to help him. One of them pointed at him, the other stayed still. The water rose once again, but he knew better this time. He sucked in a deep breath and held it, clamping his eyes shut as tears threatened to fall down his face. The water was angry at this and made up its mind. His time was up. The cage began filling faster and faster until it was filled completely. For some reason, he felt the urge to open his eyes. Foolishly, he did. But they did not blur or stink like he thought they would. No, he could see clearly. He could still see the figures outside. He thumped on the glass, the water pushing back at his movements. His chest was stinging, his body was aching from tiredness. The figures swallowed closer to the cage, the outlines of their facial features becoming clearer in the darkness outside. They were laughing. He couldn't hear them, but the reflection of their teeth and the shaking of their shoulders gave it away. He pounded on the glass, punching it, kicking it. Nothing worked. Not even a crack appeared. He was wasting his energy, and he knew it all too well. His constricted chest was screaming in pain. "Breathe, idiot! Breathe!" The figures outside seemed to agree. He watched their mouths move. "Breathe," they said in unison. "Breathe!" Outside of the cage, it appeared to get darker. The figures faded. He was alone. In some twisted sense of desperation, he almost wanted them to stay with him. They did this to him. They needed to watch the consequences. It was their fault. It wasn't fair. It was completely dark outside now. The only light came from the bottom of his glass cage, the waves of white rippling around his body as it was trapped too. He saw a face in the glass. With bloodshot eyes, it stared back at him. That's when he realized he wasn't there. "Louis, breathe!" A voice screamed at him. Hands grabbed his shoulders and shook him violently. He felt a punch to his stomach and the water erupted from his mouth. Instantly, Louis started to choke and splutter, his lungs burning and his limbs numb. He opened his eyes and his vision was still spinning. Someone dragged him towards another end of a hot tub, and he felt his neck starting to rest against a cool surface, the water jets pushing against his skin. His eyes were blurred and he could barely make out the edges of shapes, but the patch of pink was unmistakable. "Bess," he croaked in a hoarse voice. Hyperventilating in a panic while you were trying to choke up water wasn't exactly the best combination. What the hell just happened to me? Should you fucking do that to me? Do what? Louis blinked hard, the face of his older friend starting to come into better focus. It was confronted with anger, but its eyes showed fear and concern. "What's going on?" Reese yelled, rushing out the door. You could hear footsteps climbing down the stairs. "Louis fucking drowned!" Baz replied, trying to pull his younger friend a little further upright to help his choking as he started to panic himself. Whoa, what? The Scotsman said, striding over to the hot tub. Baz spoke quickly. "I came to tell him it's time to get ready and his head was under fucking water, with his eyes closed. I called to him and he wasn't answering and I pulled him out and he wasn't breathing." He ran his shaking hand through his pink hair, getting it dumped from where he had been holding Louis' shoulders. "Fuck!" By now, Ryan and Will were at the balcony door and were listening to the pink-haired man's explanation. They exchanged a concerned look that only the two of them could understand. "Don't do that to me, man! I thought you were dead!" The group waited in silence for a bit, not knowing what to do. Louis continued to count, but he was calming down now. Do you think you can stand up? Reese asked Louis once he had stopped spluttering. He nodded with a preoccupied mind and Reese helped him get out of the water and onto a garden chair on the balcony. Ryan eventually left Will's side to join Bess. Come on, mate, he said as reassuringly as possible. Come sit on the sofa. The two walked into the cabin together, Bess taking deep breaths while Ryan gave him a reassuring pat on the back. Will took the initiative to go up to Louis' room and get him some dry clothes. What happened? Reese asked quietly. Louis just shrugged. I think I fell asleep, mate, was all he got for an explanation. It was good enough for Reese. Phil came down with a black, long-sleeve t-shirt with a white front and back, black jeans, trainer socks, and underwear which he had sneakily put in between the items to not embarrass his younger friend. He also had a towel and a cold glass of water. Louis looked at the water, a little sickened by the sight of it. I know you probably don't feel like drinking, I just thought something cold might help your throat. Will explained as he passed Louis the towel. The younger man nodded gratefully, cautiously eyeing up the glass as the musician placed it on the table. Louis took a deep breath and began to ruffle his dripping hair with the towel. He pulled it away to reveal a knotted mess of brownish black. Any better? He said, managing a weary smile. Will and Reese smiled back. Perfect, the Scotsman replied, messing up Louis' hair even more before standing up. Looks just like it normally does. Gee, thanks, the younger man replied sarcastically. Reese and Will laughed. Louis paused and looked down a second. We're still going to the restaurant, right? The two other men glanced at each other. Probably not, Will said. Yeah, Reese said at the exact same time. Louis looked between the two. Well, that helped. Will and Reese quickly got into a debate. I doubt he's fit to trek to the restaurant right now. It's not that far, Will. It's literally on the other side of the park. How is that not far? It's not like he'll be on his own. We'll be with him the entire time. Can he have a part in this conversation? Louis piped up. Look, Dawkins, do you really think you're going to be okay in a hot restaurant after all of that? Will gestured at the hot tub. Like, do you feel ill? Drowsy? I don't want to make you guys lose out because of me. Louis replied, dodging the questions. The purple-haired man looked at him sternly. And you have been hyping the whole thing up for a while, so you can tell me that you won't be disappointed. Remind me though, was that before or after you nearly drowned? To be honest, Reese chimed in, wouldn't a bit of food be a good thing? I hardly flippin' doubt it. Will replied, shooting the grey-haired man an angry look. Silence. How about we ask Ryans what they think? Reese suggested. Louis looked a little unsure about this, but nodded solemnly, so they all went back inside. Louis holding the towel over his shoulders like a cape and holding the clothes in his arm. Bess watched him as he came into the cabin, reassuring himself that everything was okay. I'm sorry for freaking out, he told Louis as the three men came back into the cabin. And sorry for punching you in the gut, I just panicked. I thought I could get the water out of you that way. Louis gave him an understanding look. Well, it worked! He tried to joke. Bess gave a small smile and Louis sighed. Sorry for scaring you in the first place. The pink-haired man nodded. Nothing else needed to be said on that topic. Reese began to continue the conversation from outside. So, we were wondering about the restaurant, the one we were going to tonight? Yeah, do we still think it's a good idea to go? I mean, do you feel sick? Bess asked Louis. The younger man gave a mix of shrug and a shake of his head. Can you walk alright? You don't feel like you are going to pass out, right? Answer honestly, Louis. Ryan said, suddenly joining the conversation. Don't think about if it will offend us or anything like that. Louis sighed. I feel a bit tired, if that changes anything. He couldn't stop seeing the grinning shadows. Why could he not stop seeing them? Let's not go then. We can go tomorrow, Will insisted. Reese looked at Louis and felt like he saw his younger friend's hopes drop. And that's when he remembered. Wait, did you have lunch today? Louis shook his head. And when you got in the car, didn't you say that you were in a rush and didn't have breakfast? Bess added. Yeah. So you haven't eaten anything since last night? Will asked, suddenly doubting his argument to stay home. Louis stood there awkwardly as an obtrusive thought shoved its way into his head. Why did they just watch me? Damn, no wonder why they were so tired. Reese mumbled under his breath. Ryan suddenly felt extremely guilty for being cautious around Louis. No one really said anything. So, are we going or not? Louis asked, desperately trying to take his mind off of things. Yeah, we are, Ryan stated. He stood up. I suppose I should go and get in something that hasn't been dunked on by a water bucket. He began walking up the stairs, his footsteps receding. Phil raised his eyebrows and shook his head as he began to walk off. A minority of his thoughts told him it was a bad idea to be going out, but a man's gotta eat. Bess and Reese went into their rooms on the lower floor, while Louis went into the downstairs bathroom since he didn't have a reason to go into his room. He already had clothes. He looked into the mirror, watching the face that looked back at him. He laughed nervously, thoughts rushing through his head. He had fallen asleep in the water. He had almost drowned. He had scared the living hell out of his friends. He almost ruined their holidays. Louis looked at his reflection. It's me. He suddenly regretted saying that, a strange pang of fear striking his chest. But he shook his head and took a deep breath. Who else was he expecting to see?